the headlines out of Ukraine, out of Russia. Would you also agree that for the first time, they're actually quite aligned, a constructive view?
Well, I would say there's two things. You're very right to say that for the first time, we see that the Ukrainian delegation and the Russian delegation walk away with the same conclusions. Remember, every time it was a very different picture where the two sides would be very far apart in terms of the conclusions. This time, it does seem that they attended the same meeting and they agreed on a number of issues. The thing that really caught my eye is Russia saying we are open to this meeting between Volodymyr Zelenskiy, the Ukrainian prime minister, and of course, Vladimir Putin. Remember, for a very long time, the idea was that Russia did not or would not want to sit down with Zelensky because Russia believed that he was an actor, that he was a clown, that he carried no weight here, and that Russia would only speak to the big powers of the world. So that is now changing. When it comes to the Russians saying we're going to cut back some of the deployments around the capital, the reality is, Jonathan, they're doing this because they're not able to take the capital. It's been there for 3 weeks. We all remember the pictures of that convoy into the capital city of Ukraine. They've not been able to take it. So there has been an idea for days now that this was an operation that had already failed for Russia. Perhaps a lot of this is trying to save face for the fact that Ukraine has really solidified its control of the Ukrainian capital.
Maria, the whole way over the last 6 weeks, 2 months, it's been incredibly difficult to trust the Russian side. They told us they weren't planning to invade. They invaded. They told us they weren't building up troops. They were going to send them back. They built them up even more. When they say they're going to sharply cut military operations near Kyiv, have we got any detail of what that actually means and how we'll verify that in the coming days?
Well, we're going to have to verify that, in fact, they're doing this. And you're very right to point out that repeatedly Russia has flat out lied, especially when they talked about the invasion, but also the use of Belarus. We're not going to use it in the invasion. They're doing that. They also talked about we're not going to target civilians. They clearly have. So a lot of this has to be verified. And we're probably going to have to wait for the authorities in the capital of Ukraine, particularly from Mayor Klitschko, to say whether or not they're seeing this. But to me, what is key here is the Russians saying, we agree we need to pull back some of the deployments in order to have mutual trust in the talks. So that is a good thing. The other thing I would point to is we've seen many different talks happening here, but this one felt differently because Erdogan was there. He chaired the meeting. He was a master of ceremony. He's employing his political capital. The Russians and Ukrainians appeared to think Turkey is the right mediator, and he said, this week we need something on paper.
Maria, how willing are Western leaders to reward this outreach by Vladimir Putin if it sticks in terms of him withdrawing troops and actually easing some of the sanctions versus continuing to penalize what a lot of people view as completely unjust and, frankly, a humanitarian disaster in Ukraine caused by the invasion?
I mean, it's a disaster. When you look at Mariupol, this is incredible. It's 80% of a city that's been destroyed. Humanitarian corridors that don't work. And the Ukrainians insisting, and we have to insist, that they believe war crimes have been committed in Ukraine. But you make a very good point. The first things the Russians will say is that we show you goodwill, so therefore you have to lift the sanctions. And this is going to create a huge political fight in the European Union, because we know there are some countries that would be inclined to do that as a show of goodwill too, and there are some, particularly in Eastern Europe, that I know have already told me we should not do this. We don't learn from history. Until the Russians pull back completely, we should not lift any of the sanctions on the country.